Great.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming by.
Yeah.
I see you brought something.
I did.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. I'll leave it here till we get to it.
There you go. Good prop.
Yeah.
So, obviously, you and I have known each other for a long time. You were there early days of Salesforce as employee number 11. Built up that company, founder and CEO of Zuora from the earliest days. Built that company up, and now we'll get into it, talking about the whole movement of the subscription economy itself. So, lots of good stuff for us to unpack. Obviously, we've known each other for a long time. We've had the pleasure of being a VC investor and board member in Zuora. Let's rewind the tape.
Sure.
Take us back to the earliest days when you had joined Salesforce. What compelled you to join them at that time, and what were those early days like? What did Salesforce figure out?
Absolutely. So, let me stall a little bit while I think about the answer. So, first of all, thanks for holding this event and for inviting us, and what an incredible day, and being an incredible partner to our company over the years. Early days of Salesforce, I would say this. I would say that being in Silicon Valley, being in sort of venture-backed startup type of worlds. I mean, ultimately, you have to have a good product, you have to have a good company, you have to have a good set of folks in the organization. But what you're looking for, in terms of the idea, is you're looking for, some big discontinuity, usually caused by technology, right? That opens up a space, right? So you're looking for something that invalidates the existing set of players, right, in the area that you care about, whether it's music or software or photos, whatever it is, and allows you to create something new. But that gives you advantage to the new person because it's new, right? Because the discontinuity broke. And so at Salesforce, obviously, it was about the internet, right? It was about the internet, and in the sense that, gosh, all the things that we used to do at Oracle, at Siebel, these other companies to create software don't make any sense anymore, right? And there's an opportunity to rebuild everything with a new idea, the new set of images. And that's what was exciting at Salesforce, the idea that here was a set of folks, including Parker, including Mark, including the early Dave Mullenhoff, the early founders, to figure that out, right? There was dedication and commitment to figure that out. And if you do figure it out, which is the if, then that creates a massive, massive opportunity.
Yeah. So take us from that. Obviously, you helped grow Salesforce into the foundation for the tremendous company that it became during your time there. And then tell us about the founding story for the idea that became Zuora. What was that inception or that aha moment like that led you to take that leap?
Yeah. Well, if you boil Salesforce down, right, to its basics, and it was about, there's probably two stories, right? One was about how to use this software model, right? How do you build software differently? How do you distribute software differently? But just as fundamental, if not, probably even more fundamental, is the whole business model is different, right? And this idea that says, well, selling software doesn't make any sense. We should just let people subscribe to it. And it sounds simple, but that had massive, profound implications on the company, right? Down to, we built the product differently. And I remember, just to talk about silly conversations, right? We were sitting with the developers, and developers saying, here's a bunch of users that actually don't use our product. Those are the best users, right? Because they take no resources, no cost, and they just give us money. It's like, well, that doesn't really make any sense, right? Because eventually, of course, those users stop giving us money. And so we should be actually doing the reverse. We should be tracking users, tracking what they're doing, and then figuring stuff out. All the stuff that we take for granted now. And how we market, how we sell, and so on, the creation of customer success. And the epiphany for us was to say, is that shift to subscriptions, is using the power of a very different business model to change the vendor-customer dynamic. Is that just limited to the software industry? And when you said it that way, it says, well, this could really apply to anything, right? That nothing was specific to software. And we looked at early signs, companies like Zipcar that was doing that to transformation. Why buy a car? You can subscribe to a car. Yeah. Companies like Netflix, when they were sending out DVDs, right? Why buy a DVD when you can subscribe and pay $20 a month and get the whole movie catalog? And we said, this is where the world is going, right? That if it happened to software, it's going to happen every place else. And that was really, really exciting for us, right? Because it said, okay, we didn't use the traditional enterprise software stack, right? We didn't use ERP systems. We had to build all these things. And so if all companies would shift their business models, right? Again, you're looking at that discontinuity. This discontinuity was less technology. It was more around business model, obviously enabled by the technology. Then that was interesting because it invalidated all the incumbent companies, right? The Oracle, the SAPs of the world, and gave a startup a chance to build something profound and new that ultimately would take over the world.
Did you have a sense even back then of how big it could become? That could go beyond all these software markets? Because we talked about those sectors weren't there yet at that point.
Yeah.
You were talking about the subscription economy long time before other people got the vision. And it's finally here, maybe more than anybody ever expected.
We definitely believed it, right? That's it's probably the startup entrepreneurs, right? DNA, where like you just you see it, you take a leap of faith. We didn't know how it was going to evolve. We probably skewed a little bit towards disruptors, right? So we always thought there would be new companies that basically invalidate, because that was our DNA, that was our psychology. We're Salesforce, and we're going to go disrupt Siebel. We're going to go disrupt Oracle, right? And so what we've seen over the last 10 years, though, since we've been at this for 10 years now, is that this shift actually can favor a disruptor, but it also favor an incumbent, right? It's about rethinking your customers. These big companies have big customer relationships, and I think the last 5-6 years, with conversations about digital technology, is causing these guys to transform pretty quickly.
Yeah. So on that path, when you took Zuora from that 100 to 100 million plus rate, and now much larger than that, what were the things that clicked along the way? Was there an inflection point in your mind? I know from our experience together, but as you distill it all together, was there a particular inflection point or something that clicked that drove the market growth and allowed it to take off from those early years when it wasn't apparent and it was harder to the point now where it's become this massive wave?
Yeah. I think the theme of this conference is 1 in 100, and it's something that I've given a lot of thought about, in building this company and watching Salesforce and talking to just a bunch of other entrepreneurs, startup CEOs. And I think the reality is there's a series of inflection points, right? And every time you hit one inflection point, there's another one in the horizon, there's another one in the horizon. And so just to conveniently, mark them all off, right? The 1s and 3s feel like a convenient place to put markers. And so I talk sometimes about how, there's a set of things that you have to prove every step of the way, right? So initially it's proving the idea of getting to $1 million, and then you have to prove the product, and then you've got to prove the business model, and you've got to prove the market, right? And so every step of the way there's something. And so a lot of, startups will get to, call it $3 million, call it $10 million, and figure, gosh, we proved the idea, we proved the product, we proved we can sell this thing. But we wind up with all these customers, and only half of them are good, and half of them are not good, right? You didn't know at the time. And there's a learning then to say, okay, now how do we distill that back into what we do? There's another milestone out there of proving the business model, right? Everything's working, the customers are great, but the business model isn't quite clicking. And if you see an opportunity because you've picked a big market that allows you to aspire to be a public company, then you really, really, really have to work on that business model. To make it all work, right? So there's a whole series of inflection points that you've got to tackle in doing the climb to 100 million.
What do you think were the hardest challenges that we had to figure out along the way?
Well, so for us, proving the idea wasn't hard, right? So there are some companies out there that have a technology, and you're trying to figure out, well, where's the fit? For us, we knew the demand was there, right? And our initial customer set, we didn't know that General Motors, Caterpillar, General Electric, these large companies, when they would come. But we had a whole set of other SaaS companies that can get us going that says, look, we're all trying to be Salesforce. We all need these set of tools. And some of these guys are like big companies now, like DocuSign, Zendesk, and these guys, and Box. And so we knew that. What we had to figure out was probably the product. For us, it turns out the product is much broader and deeper to make it work, to hit that inflection point where the product hits a sweet spot, enough of a sweet spot of the marketplace. Yeah. That was hard. And then if you look beyond the product in terms of how do you get it working, Salesforce was adoption, right? Because it was easy to sell, but nobody would use it back then. Everybody uses it now, but back then, it was 56K dial-up modems. I mean, no one actually used the thing. People think Salesforce is a runaway success, but it was tough in the early days. For us, it's the deployment of the product. The deployment of our space, our product was the biggest challenge, and to wrap our heads around that, to reject conventional wisdom that says, you're a SaaS company, don't build a big services team, right? The lesson for this is every step of the way, take all the lessons, take all the experience, take all the conversations, but you got to start with a blank sheet of paper and really see what the situation is and design a solution that makes sense for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, talk about the product evolution a bit more, because I think that's an interesting deep dive. How you started the focus of it, and then obviously expanded significantly over time from the initial billing inception to now basically everything in between ERP and CRM and just as big a category as those others. That was a thoughtful evolution. How did you expand that over time, and when did you know it was the right time to add significant new areas?
Well, we did have a good mental model to start, at least at a high level, right? Which is, if you say it's all about subscription-based business models, the one industry, there's a few industries, but the biggest industry that's a subscription-based business model is the telecom industry. And I worked with telecom industries before Salesforce in a bunch of other roles. And so their architecture is simply different. And so we had that mental model that says, look, they have this big thing in the middle. They have a language called BSS, OSS. They put a CRM system in the front. They put an accounting system in the back. But then these products are terrible products. They're really service bureaus, right? And so that's as far as we can take the lesson. But the other thing is that's why the vision is important. We see the whole world going to the subscription economy. We want to power that world. We actually have a graphical logo that we use internally to convey that. And so for us, it says, okay, well, we need to build a product that's universal, right? And that's one of the things that made it hard for us. We wanted, business-to-business models, business-to-consumer models. We wanted all the different countries. Yeah. And so we really stretched what we needed to do. But we said, look, if we can figure this out, if we can get through it, now we have a big market, right? Otherwise, we're a niche company. And that's not what our bet is about. So that's a setup. When do you invest in more product? I mean, you have a general sense of saying, are you product constrained, right? Or are you distribution capacity constrained, right? And you can generally get a good sense of that. And if you're product constrained, that's where you focus on. But chances are most companies make a mistake. They don't realize, well, the product is not going to address the whole market. But there's a huge chunk of the market that you can go get right now, right? And so focus your distribution channel on that and get more revenue, right? Because then you can reinvest, you can raise another round, whatever it happens to be. And so typically, you're more capacity constrained than product constrained than you realize.
Yeah. And how did that product evolution match up as you were also expanding upward in the type and sophistication of the customers that you were going after? So you moved from some of these early adopters and software companies to now it's these incredible Fortune 50, Fortune 10 organizations in the world. Obviously, you got to learn how to service, work with, and understand an entirely new set of enterprises. How did you go about learning that and then building the organization to handle that shift?
Well, I think the DNA of our company had a lot of the enterprise focus. One of the things I did the last 3 years at Salesforce was to help Salesforce break into Fortune 500 companies. There was a period of time early on where I probably had the most enterprise sales experience at Salesforce because we were hiring telesales reps. And so the move up market, outside of Benioff, the move up market was comfortable and familiar to us. And we had a lot of that DNA in our organization. I think the move up market, you could look at it from a product perspective or you could look at it from a distribution perspective, and the solve typically is more on the distribution side. Yes, there's a whole set of product needs around roles and permissions, organizational controls, right? But those things are typically not dramatically different between small companies and big companies. It's just the level, of customization is just higher.
Yeah. If you could go back in time to the founding of Zuora, with all the stuff that you've learned now as a CEO and builder over that time, what advice would you give yourself that you didn't know back then?
Without cheating and thinking about, look, with perfect hindsight, you can do it again. You could always avoid all those mistakes, right? That lost customer I would have saved, right? Things like that. that employee that quit, I probably would have like did something about earlier, right? You know, I'd say in hindsight, right, what we probably took more time to learn was around customer success for this, right? I think we carry too much of the, you know, well, a lot of SaaS is, which is easy to install, yeah, right? You know, easy decisions, right? Stuff like that. We carried a lot of that baggage with us. And if we can do it all over again, we says, look, you know, realize that that is not what you are, right? And maybe 80, 90% of SaaS companies up to then have been like that, but the space that you picked requires something a little bit different, right? And that would have avoided a whole bunch of mistakes. You carry ideas and assumptions in that when they prove not to be right, those are the things that really, really trip you up.
Yeah. So now you've moved from this interesting evolution from the time and experience when you built up Salesforce, translating that into the experience to build Zuora into this fantastic and sizable company, now great publicly traded company. And now even beyond, you've recently come out with your book, which we have here, subscribed.
Distinctive green cover.
There you go.
Look for the green cover.
And you know, we also have copies in the back here as well. It's a great book. It dives into something much bigger that I think you had a vision for early on that a lot of people didn't get. It took a long time for people to get there. And it seems like we keep realizing how bigger and bigger this is. This whole shift that you talk about from companies focused on selling products to companies identifying a customer need and figuring out how to service that. Talk to us about that shift. What is that shift and how big of a change in mindset is that?
Well, so if the goal of building an enduring, you know, a startup that becomes an enduring company is, it's the old, I think Warren Buffett said this, is you know, he looks for a snowball and a big hill, right? And I think his book is called Snowball, because it's a dominant theme is you need a big hill, right? And so you're looking for a big market. And a big market that a startup can attack, which requires a discontinuity, right? And then the implication is, okay, you got to do a lot of explaining, right? Because what is it about the old world and the new world? What makes the new world different than the old world? And look, it's, the Salesforce, the company is called Salesforce.com, but I don't think we spend any energy ever talking about Salesforce automation, right? You know, I don't even know that the company actually understands what salespeople do, right? So as a product, but it was all about you know, on-demand software, cloud computing, right? And so all our energies was to help people explain that, right? And then people have misconceptions. Well, it can't be customized. Well, gosh, now we got to explain that's not true. You can't integrate it. Well, now we got to explain why that's not true, right? It's not secure. Now we got to explain whether that's true. It can't scale, you know. And we did that for, you know, going up market, Fortune 500 companies, new countries, new verticals, like healthcare, public sector, financial services, right? And so the history of the company was just evangelizing all that. And so we have a lot of that here too. And so we spend a lot of our time evangelizing, well, what is this new business model? Why you should be excited about it? And it turns out now, like, because we've been doing it for 10 years, now that the world feels like hey, it's really coming. They see Spotify going public. They see all these examples around them, right? And you know, now all that evangelism is really kicking in. And so the reason we wrote the book is to continue that. I mean, we can only call so many people. We can only have so many meetings with our sales organization. We can only get so many people to our events. But we wanted to take our ideas, put it into a book, and get it out to the widest audience possible. Yeah. And so yeah, there's something definitely still there about a physical book. Why are we convinced that all companies, if you just because the audience here, if you distill, if you know, old enough to have worked in the software industry right before it went subscriptions, and there's this moment, right? And we all have this moment at Salesforce that says, you know, like this idea of letting a customer use it, and watching their usage and making it much better. I mean, it just changes the game, and it changes everything. and it's just much better, right? And you know, there's like, well, now that you've done this, I'm never going to go back. Why would I ever go back? Why wouldn't I just launch something, see what the customers are doing, talk to the customers, you know, reach out to them, and iterate from there. And that's the lesson, right? That's the lesson that says a subscription model isn't about, look, I'm going to sell you the same way, but I'm going to sell it to you at $10 a month versus $100 up front, right? It's about a whole different way of engaging with customers that leads just to a much healthier company and a much healthier product.
Yeah. So now you've seen now a whole wave of these large companies that have adopted. You've got marquee customers like Ford and Caterpillar and these amazing names. It's still a big wave that's ongoing. What do large global corporates need to understand about what's changed in order for them to survive and thrive? What's the new understanding they've got to make for these companies that have been historically primarily focused on pushing product?
Yeah. There's a huge hunger for, the companies are all talking about digital disruption, right? And the whole ecosystem, right? McKinsey, Deloitte, all these guys are talking about digital disruption. So it's top of mind for all these folks, right? And they see the examples. They see the examples of Uber. They see the examples of Spotify and so on and so forth. And so you know, we've been asked to talk at a lot of these events. We've been invited like Tyco, Johnson Controls, EA. And the essence that we do is, okay, there's a digital disruption on the technology side, certainly, right? But at a core fundamental goal for your business, it's about rethinking your customers, rediscovering your customers, right? It's that same mindset, right? Imagine that mindset as a software company. It's like, gosh, I used to just send the product out, and I didn't really know what customers are doing. Now I can actually see what they're doing every single day. If you apply that to General Motors now with the millions of drivers that they have, right? If you apply that to you know, Disney, right, with all the folks watching movies and, you know, buying stuffed animals, right, going to the theme parks, you can really explode this whole thing and the whole way of thinking. And it turns fundamentally, you know, going forward, the fundamental asset that companies have is not product. It's not their innovations, right? You can copy these things fairly easily. It's their relationships with their customers, right? If you take that and put that into your core business model, in the same way that Salesforce has done in their company, the SaaS companies, you know, here are trying to do, it just transforms your company. And that's the key lesson that we try to drive forward, right? And so you think about, you know, you talk about Caterpillar, they don't know who their customers are because there's a whole dealer network. You talk about Nike, they don't know who their customers are. You know they have customers. You talk about Ford, they don't know who their customers are. But these companies are all trying to transform and change that pretty much overnight.
Right. They're thinking about products
They're
more
thinking
so
about
than
products.
relationships.
That's right.
Yeah. Is this an existential threat for a lot of these traditional global corporates? A couple of the striking things you bring up in your book, I think since 2000, is that half of the Fortune 500 is gone.
Yeah.
And the average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company on that list over the last 40 years has gone from 75 years to 15 years. That's a pretty huge shift. Is this existential for them?
So what we found talking to these companies is it starts off as existential. Absolutely. It starts off with the fear, right? We don't want to be Ubered, right, is the phrases that pop up. But what they ultimately rediscover is these are growth opportunities, right? So if you look at Caterpillar, right, I mean, massive company. But if you look at the revenues, it's gone from 50 to 45 to 42 to 40, right? There's a broader trend that, you know, these products are just getting better. Why buy more products, right? And so revenues are declining. And at a macro level, you know, we actually believe this is actually slowing the GDP down. But if they reinvent themselves as subscription services, right, it could lead to massive growth. And the best examples of that today are the technology industry, right? You look at what's happened with Adobe, you look at what's happened with PTC. The companies that are successful in doing this transition are redefining growth. If you want to get out of the technology sector, the music sector has been on this 15, 20-year decline ever since Napster. Right, and so iTunes slowed down that decline a little bit, right? But it was still single song sales. But now in the last 2-3 years, it's been growing again, and it's because they rediscovered their customers through Spotify and through other things, right? The artists are making money again, and the whole sector is starting to grow again. And so what these companies are discovering is that if they do this right, they become growth companies. I mean, heck, the software sector. I'll go back to the night, is it 2006, 2005, right? Merrill Lynch was saying that the software sector was, and by the way, this is all in the book, is dead, right? It's a slow growth industry. It's a utility. Nicholas Carr, does IT even matter, right? The end of IT, whatever the book that was, and they should start paying out dividends. And no one's talking about this anymore, right? Because the shift to SaaS has reignited innovation, reignited growth, and just changed the fundamental relationship between the vendor and the customer, in a much more stable, better way.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like something where you've been talking about this for a while. We're still catching up. I wonder if we're still underestimating how big of a shift this is and the opportunity it is. Obviously, for these global corporates, they want to move from a product mindset to a customer relationship mindset, how they can transform themselves, but also all of the startup CEOs and entrepreneurs, like a lot of those here in the audience here today, who are somewhere on that 1 to 100 path. This is just an opportunity for them to understand that mind shift and orient how they're thinking about
Absolutely.
finding and serving a need.
Well, I think there's this first generation of SaaS that's okay. Let's take a software product and let's use cloud to deliver it a little bit better, right? But if you pull up at a macro level, this is more about a trend that feels more like the end of ownership. I know that feels weird to us right now, right? That says, gosh, well, why wouldn't we own it? But you don't own software anymore, right? And there's a lot of things you don't own. You don't own your movies, you don't own your music, you don't own software. Right, a lot of folks that came here probably came here in a car that they don't own, and so if you think about that as an entrepreneur, 1 to 100, don't just think about there's an HR product, I'm creating an online HR, right? Think about what is the macro level thing, what is the bigger concept that it's about employee engagement, it's about workforce, even workforce management is a software name, right? It's about having an incredibly inspired, powered workforce that's engaged every day with a common mission, right? There's something higher, right, that's at the real heart of what people are looking for. It's not about the car, it's about getting from point A to point B. Right? It's not about music, it's about entertainment, right? That's really, those are the heart of what it is. And when you look at it that way, there's enormous opportunity, right? There's enormous opportunity for us to reinvent all parts of our lives under this new mental model.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really striking thing for me reading through the book. And I think it's a fantastic book, even for someone who's been close to the story and seeing it evolve. The more time I reflect on it and you think about it, the more you just keep realizing how much farther this wave goes, how big a transformation this really is. So I'd encourage you to read the book. It's great. I was one of the early people who could read a copy of it. Now it has been published. We actually just got them from the printer yesterday, and we have some copies in the back if anyone wants to buy it. And Tien has graciously agreed to be back there for a bit, sign some copies if anybody wants those. So I think there's a lot more interesting stuff to come with the company, the whole movement, and I've loved getting to know you and working with you.
Great.
Thanks a lot for coming by.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks so much.
Thank you.